So as you know, I'm always on the lookout for the cheapest possible tools that you guys can use to do the job. It's mainly been focused around things like oscilloscopes before, finding ones that are really true to how they work, and tweezers, solder, flux, anything I can where the implements are good enough to do the job and cheap enough at the same time. So I own pretty much all of the soldering irons, from £10 soldering irons up to thousands of pounds. But today we have this GVDA. This is a company that's reached out to me and has sent me this for free. So this isn't an influenced video. They've simply sent me this for free to do a review on. And that's my intention now, is let's take a look at this iron, because this looks similar to like the TS80s and TS100s, so USB-C powered soldering iron. But this is significantly cheaper. So if this does the same job, then this is potentially a much cheaper soldering iron for you guys to use, without having to go to the expense of things like HAKKOs and Wellers. So I'm going to open this up. We're going to take a look at doing things like desoldering springs off Game Boys. We'll take a look at things like soldering on a large heatsink. And we'll maybe just remove and re-add some caps on a link, something like that. Some actual real-world use. So I don't know what we've got here. I've literally not opened them yet. They've just sent me this bunch. So this looks like a soldering iron stand. Let's just take a look. Yeah, and that looks like a kind of nice, it's an aluminium by the looks of it, aluminium little stand, little sponge. I personally use brass wool over sponge, and I'm guessing that just goes in there like that. That's quite nice. That does feel sort of premium, and that's actually probably usable. So most of the stands you get with the kits are just bent pieces of metal that simply don't work. This actually does look like it's possibly usable. So that's a cool little thing. Put that to one side for now. We've got the iron itself, so let's get to the main part of this. I've got the iron here with, I don't know if that's meant to be removed or just an optional sleeve to keep on for grip, maybe. Feels like it should be, in my eyes. I'd probably want to leave that on as like a grip. It feels nice, but doesn't look like it should be. It almost looks like a temporary packaging, and that is quite slippy to hold without that, to be honest. That's very slippy. So this was probably an afterthought once they'd made it and realised it slips. They've made this kind of sleeve, so I'm going to keep that sleeve on there. It does actually help with grip quite a bit. And then in the package we have locking nut, 2 buttons, Type-C interface. Mentions it goes from 80 to 420C. I'd solder probably pretty much at the high end of that. I think I have my irons on 420 all the time. 65 watt USB-C power delivery. Operating instructions, we shouldn't really need one for an iron. It should hopefully be self-explanatory. Press A and B at the same time to enter the menu. Click A and B to slide up and down. Long press A to exit. Long press B to enter. Standby time, looks like it goes into standby once it's resting. And that's really it. I'm not going to bother reading much more unless we have to when we struggle. And there's the cheapy little stands I'm always on about. So these are the really cheap stands that almost never work, and you're meant to sort of rest your iron on. Like, they kind of do, but they just, you know, not the best. Let's compare that to the premium stand they've sent, which I guess the iron rests there, and you wouldn't rest, well, I guess you could rest the whole iron in there as well. But yeah, I can see that being usable in the field, or even on your desk as a budget. It's a nice compact stand and looks cool. So I'm going to actually use that as part of when we're soldering. Put the iron over there. And then we have a USB cable. Now here's, I can tell straight away this is going to be a slight problem and annoyance. This is quite a rigid cable. So you can see it's holding its shape. It's not really silicon based. So that, when you're soldering, is going to drive you nuts. So what happens, and this is what happens on like the TS80 irons and things, you put the lead in, you start to solder, and you can feel this resistance here of that sort of wire getting in your way when you're soldering. Sounds a bit silly until you do it yourself, but trust me, if this isn't a soft cable, really flexible silicon like we did on the SNES controllers, this will impact your ergonomics of using the iron. Got some free solder, which, again, good for starters who don't want to spend on everything at once. You've kind of got your stand, your solder, your soldering iron, so that's a good little thing. I won't be using that though. I'll just use our Solder King solder for this test. So I'll just put the stand, the solder back in there for now. We've got some spare tips, which, let's have a look which ones we've got. We've got a needle point, which I'm not a fan of, but everybody that works for me definitely likes those tips. You've got your kind of gull, your well there. that's a good tip for larger jobs. You've just got your thicker snub tip, which again, generally is okay. Then you've got your iron, which you'd normally use these for desolder wicking. They've also put that on as standard, which is definitely not the standard tip you'd use. So let's just take that one out. And considering they don't have the tip that I want, maybe they sell it, but the tip I always use is this curved tip, so that you can get, not only on a job, you can sort of turn it upright and get right into a job. And the reason I like this kind of tip is, let's say we need to work on this chip here. We can either get into, say, the capacitors like this, just tilting it and pointing it down at the board, or if you want to, say, drag solder this chip or remove it, you can simply rotate it around and use the flat of the tip to get a large surface area on here. So you've effectively got a point and a larger area at the same time. You've almost got the equivalent of having both of these tips on your iron at the same time. So I'm sure they will sell those tips. Here's a HAKKO tip, and look at that. This is just a HAKKO tip slightly shorter. So you know I am definitely going to try and take out my HAKKO tip and try it in this iron afterwards. So that does mean you can use high quality HAKKO tips if you like, and potentially these in HAKKOs as well if these are cheaper than buying from HAKKO. So that's a good upside, that the tips are going to be good. So let's start with the tip that you guys will probably use the most. Let's insert this point in, screw the locking nut down, and it comes with, at least mine came with this 65 watt charger with 2 ends, and it's also come with a European plug and a US plug. The funny thing is I'm in the UK, so I actually need one of these. And then another thing they've sent, which looks like I think this will screw on, it's a guess, to this base at the side, and maybe act like a grip to hold your work. So let's see what this is. And again, these will be extras. The iron will be one thing, the tips will be another, and I'm sure that premium stand will be another product. So these are quite cool. You've got 4 grips, and it's your classic flexible arms. These actually feel really good quality as well. So, yep, they come with nuts on the end as well. Or at least they come with, there we go, nuts on this end. So you unscrew the nut, get the stand, take that foam out a minute, and thread it through here. And then the other end will have crocodile clips. So these are actually really nice feeling. They feel quality. They don't feel cheap at all. So the stand, the iron, and that works really well. I've got a feeling this base is going to need some weight, but to be honest, I don't think on one you're going to like hold an entire console. Oh, you actually are. That's impressive. So if you get that center weighted, that is literally holding up a Game Boy off this little stand. Even at an angle, that's really impressive. That is cool. So I've never used these before, never found them useful really, but to be honest, I do like that. Those little 4 grips and that stand do seem quite useful. So I probably would recommend these. I will stock these, to be honest. So let's just put all the tools to one side for now, because the main part of this is to see how well this iron works. So let's just get straight to soldering. Just going to plug this in the power supply, which is right next to me. And you can see straight away this wire is what kind of gets in your way. You want to make sure you get out the way. The screen is now telling me to press a button. And there we go, it looks like it's turned on and going up to temperature. And you've got 20 volts. Set 300 on the set, so let's see. Yep, obvious of what you do, just press up and down to change temperature, and then just wait for it to set. So that's self-intuitive. And let's start with a basic job. Let's say take this cap off. So this has never been used yet, this tip, so let's see how it performs. And you can see the micro tip is doing exactly what a micro tip had expected to do, which is the heat wants to flow up and not onto the very point. That's why I kind of find these tips useless, because they don't transfer enough heat, even at the 400C. You can see this is really struggling to transfer heat in. This is no different, by the way, than using the HAKKO to do this. This HAKKO would struggle just the same with this tip. You can just see the heat transfer is sort of not there. So if you wanted to remove this cap, you will be able to, but look how long we're having to work on this to transfer heat. So straight away, first thing I'm going to do is dump this tip, because I don't feel these needlepoint tips are of any use. So I guess for that, we've got to unplug just to not burn ourselves. Now, let's see. Nope, that isn't hot, but isn't cool. So I'd probably typically let this cool before you'd unscrew. There might also be a double use for the silicon. It might be to, use it as like a heat guard to do this with. But just bear in mind the tip is hot. I feel what they could provide with the iron is, like HAKKO do, a silicon mat that I'm going to use to help me here. And what you do on these is you use the silicon mat to guard yourself while you're changing a tip. So this iron doesn't come with that, but I'd recommend I might even try sell something like this, just a heatproof mat. A silicon mat for removing the tips of the iron. And now let's pick a tip. So I'll come to use this tip. This is the tip I'd use when it looks like it's already been used from the factory as well, that does. Probably for a test. This is a new one. This is the one that came on the iron. But I'd probably use this for, again, thick work. So when you're working on big planes or heavy consoles. So we will come to use that tip. And out of these two, I'd rarely use these. This is for mainly desolder wicking, getting flux out of hole. This is probably mainly used for, I'd say, desolder wicking. And when I'm doing desolder wicking, I tend to use this tip anyway. So I'd almost never use this kind of well tip, really, not that size. So we're left with this. This is the option we have, an intermediate tip. So let's put that one in. Plug it back in. Yep, so tap to turn on each time. It's remembered the 400 degrees I was soldering at. So now let's see with a larger tip. Let's just wait for it to get up to temperature. And you can see it's up to temperature now, and it cools down and warms back up. It kind of self-regulates. And let's see about desoldering this off. So there you go, much better heat transfer. And you can just wiggle side to side. And that cap comes straight off. So let's take on another task, and let's say remove this cap. So we'll flip it over. We'll pre-tin both legs here. And that works really well. And then sometimes, if your iron's good enough, you can literally just go over the two holes like that. And once it's warmed enough, you can normally just tap the board to get the cap out. And look at that, works great. Let's have a go at desolder wicking. So to clear these holes out, you will require quite a bit of heat. We've got the Goodwick desolder wick, which makes a difference, high quality wick. This is where I'd normally use the thicker tip I'm on about. So for desolder wicking, I'd normally use these. But let's just have a go at this tip, see if this tip can handle it. So let's go over with the desolder wick. Hold on, and you can literally see that solder wicking up there. So see the silver traveling up. Kind of wait till that's stopped, and then you know your solder's up. I'd say we're pretty much slowing down there. And look at that, an empty hole. Well, it was until it slightly filled back in. So let's just see if we can clear that last bit out. I think it's now caught that hole. So let's just have a go with this one first. But that cleared it out, I'd say, pretty much the same as the HAKKO. Again, I'm comparing it to my everyday driver, which is the HAKKO FM. I think I use the FM 203 for the most part. You can see it's cleared that hole. Because this hole's already been mostly cleared, normally, if you go back over with desolder wick, once you've mostly cleared a hole, it will struggle to then clear. You have to fill it back in with solder. So let's just see how this performs. Yeah, so similar to most irons. Once you've almost cleared a hole, like that, you can see it hasn't cleared. That's normal. It's nothing to do with the iron. You just put a bit more solder back in so that the wick can gain traction again effectively and start melting the solder in order to wick up. And then you can see that's completely cleared. So that's worked just as well as the HAKKO 100%. So that's had no issues whatsoever in removing a capacitor and clearing the holes. So let's just chuck that cap back in. Back through. Like so. Flip over. And let's just fill him back in. And that works flawless. It's literally like I'm using my normal iron every day. This doesn't feel in any way different so far. I'm not finding anything lacking, bar, as I mentioned, just the cord. That's my only gripe so far. So I can do cap swaps. It's done desolder wicking. I've got no doubt then it's going to remove battery springs. Let's put some fresh solder on there. That's melted through no problem. Bit of flux. Desolder wick. Then we're going to put the desolder wick over and just go straight down on. That's sank in easily. You can see it plain as day wicking up, which is good. And you can see it's kind of stopped there. So you can move down and just dragging it around and reflowing, putting more flux on. It definitely picks up and restarts flowing, no problem at all. So I think this is pumping out the heat to the tip with no issues at all. And then you can see how clean that is now as well. We'll clean the flux off while it's warm as well, because flux comes off much easier while it's hot. So always clean your board while it's still up to temperature. And there's the battery spring completely desoldered. One other thing I have noticed while I've been doing this though is I keep clicking these buttons by mistake. Like when it doesn't look like it from here, but when I'm holding it in this hand and working, let's try and get it like this. And you can see my hand resting there. I seem to be pushing like, and you can hear it clicking. When I'm like squeezing my hand, I'm clicking and changing things. So maybe that is just more of a, I should be holding the iron like this, which makes obvious sense. So you can actually see the temperature as well. And then I think they mentioned if you're left or right handed actually, if you press two buttons and go in the menu, I think we can flip that view around. So if we go to the menu, version, temp, PO, rotate, there we go. And I think they said, what was it, hold B to go in? There we go. Rotate 180, perfect. So now, there we go. I should hold the iron like this. And now I can see my temperature nice and clear. I'm working, so I just want to rotate my tip around. I've got the tip effectively upside down for my working. So if you start using that and you're clicking buttons, this is the way you should hold it. And it feels really nice to hold as well. That's a natural way of holding the iron. So let's just put the solder back on here. Restore that to how it was. And then while we've still got the fat tip on, let's just have a quick go at it sinking some heavy duty copper plane. And that is absolutely no mither whatsoever. That's flowing around there flawlessly. So that is perfect. That's as good as any iron I've used. There's no issue there. There's literally no complaints really. So this iron is really performing. So now for the test I'm interested in. Does my HAKKO tip, my favorite tip, so I can do a direct comparison. Does this fit in here and work? Now it looks ridiculously long, so it's not exactly the best option, but I don't know, I can solder from next door if I want to. Solder this Game Gear without even seeing the end of the soldering iron. But let's see if this does work, which shows that potentially if there's some variant of HAKKO tips that are shorter and stumpier, then they could be used. And you can't put that on first because the nut doesn't go over that lip. So let's put it on this way, put it through, and go on here. Now we have the world's longest soldering iron. Let's plug this back in. Let's see if this actually works. That actually detected the tip then, and it started getting warm. So let's just put a bit of IPA on. Yeah, so it does detect it. All you've got to do is slightly pull it out. So I'm just leaving the brass piece off, and it has successfully detected the HAKKO tip. So now I can use my iron, the one I actually want to use. So it does work, but the length of this tip is just absurd. So it's difficult to use, but for a side-by-side comparison of the actual the tip, I would say this is soldering exactly the same as if this was connected to the HAKKO. It feels the same. So you really can't use that because, like I say, the length of it. But the proof is the tip is effectively the same. So with the regular size tip back in now, because that's not really usable, having that really long tip in, but it does prove the kind of point that you could use them in theory. Let's just have a quick go at soldering some pads. And this is just no matter at all. Let's have a go at some drag soldering, which is another thing you'll typically use an iron for, whereas if you don't get enough heat, this will just go terribly wrong, whereas if you have enough heat, you should be able to get a ball of solder. Say you were freshly installing this, a big ball of solder, and drag down, and the ball follows the iron and doesn't dry up and get stuck, which is exactly what happens here. On and off to clear a short or a bridge works perfectly fine. So I am really impressed with this iron so far. Let's have a go at just basic soldering, touching up some resistors. Yep, you can go left and right to remove them. So I can say without any shadow of a doubt, I definitely recommend the soldering iron. The tips work identical to HAKKO. It's easy to use, easy to hold. The premium stand, only for the fact that if you buy these separately, do actually work. I'm amazed by that. I did not think that would be. Even this little stand, which I probably wouldn't have recommended so much if it's an extra. But the fact that it works with these grips so well, I would actually still recommend the stand and the grips as well. It's really useful. So as a whole, I'd literally recommend everything that I've been sent here. The pros are, from the usage I've just done here, 20 minutes, half an hour of soldering, not one thing about it has been any different than using a HAKKO worth £700. And this is going to be a tenth of that almost. So there's nothing more to say bar this works in every way. It supports left-handed mode, right-handed mode. It's intuitive on the menu. It just seems great. The only cons are definitely this USB-C lead, which I will be looking at sourcing. If I can't from the company directly, we'll separately source or make a long and flexible silicon cable because this makes it completely unusable. My plug is right there, just out of view. So the plug has to be in front of your iron, which is not the best. So in short, I'm going to now contact the company back, buy these in bulk, get the best price we can, and list all of this for sale on our site. We still sell the HAKKOs for professionals that want, the best of the best. This is ergonomically perfect. You've got a professional stand, which beats the small stands. But overall, if you don't want to spend £700 on that kind of setup, this is going to be awesome. I'm even going to have these for myself for when I work from home or work from a different room or travel. This is so much more convenient. So hopefully this will help you guys if you're looking for a cheap iron that isn't cheap quality. And I like companies that do reach out and try and sell you their products and send you them for free without saying that you need to give a good review. You just need to give an honest review. So there was no requirement here for me to say that this was a good iron. And to be honest, I wasn't expecting it to be good because 90% of irons that are small and cheap are terrible. This is 100% the best iron that is not a HAKKO that I've used in a long while. So can't recommend this enough. If you want to support us and help us do more reviews like this and find you guys cheap products to buy to save you money, then definitely buy from us. It does help our company. And all the profits go back into growth of the company and continuing to do free YouTube videos, tutorials, repairs and the likes. So hopefully this was useful for you guys. And let me know your thoughts on this iron if you do buy one.